I'm Julie Principe. I have 36 years experience in British Columbia, Canada as a classroom teacher, teacher of English language learners, and a resource teacher working with neurodiverse learners. As a resource teacher, I recently retired as a district inclusion teacher and founded ADHD Roadmap Consulting to support adults, youth, and students who want to develop their executive skills. I'm also co-founder of Practical Possibilities Consulting, and you'll see some slides with that copyright. More importantly, I have family members and close friends with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. They've helped me develop a deeper understanding of the barriers for those with executive skills challenges. I am in awe of their relentless optimism and courage as they tackle everyday tasks that require more energy than a neurotypical person would need in the same situation. I'd like to begin by making a territorial acknowledgement for the lands I'm living and working on today. I'm presenting from home in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada, on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the Halkomelem, the Squamish-speaking peoples, and the Métis Nation. I'm grateful for their care and teachings about the land, water, and sky, and the life that they sustain. I respect these teachings by encouraging equity, diversity, and inclusion in the communities where I live and work. So, if you're attending this workshop or watching the recording, I'm going to guess that you're either a teacher or caregiver or parent, but if none of these descriptions fit, I'm still delighted you're here. If you're a teacher, you're probably here because you have a student in mind. If you're a parent, which sounds like most of you are, you likely have a child or teen with ADHD who might be struggling at school or at home, or both. Or maybe you have executive skills challenges yourself. Some people did indicate that. Whatever your reason for joining us, in the next 45 minutes, I'll introduce 6 important keys to unlock the development of executive skills. Each key will unlock a door, I'm sure, to more questions, and I'll do my best to answer them during the Q&A at the end, or feel free to email me or reach out to me on social media. I'd love to hear from you. So what are executive skills and why are they important? It helps to think of them in 3 clusters. Of course, in reality, they're difficult to separate and often interdependent. Executive skills help us organize and plan, get things done, and keep our cool when things don't turn out the way we expected. They work alongside our intellect and creativity and allow us to meet challenges. If we use the analogy of a ladder, we can imagine that there are some foundational skills at the bottom and more advanced skills at the top. We can think about the bottom, sort of how we react skills, as important for the development of the skills on the higher rungs. Although we don't actually develop these in sequence, the foundational skills do support the full development of the more advanced skills. Although it might seem that we're good to go when we get close to the top rungs, it's here near the top of the ladder where some of us get stuck or stall, even though they've already developed some good executive skills already. Missing these last 4 can get in the way of reaching our goals, and when we don't recognize these missing or lagging skills, we might decide that the child, teen, or young adult is unmotivated, a procrastinator, or just plain lazy. Calling someone who has difficulty with task initiation a procrastinator, or worse, is like saying that a child learning to ride a bike is losing balance and crashing on purpose. So everyone has difficulty with executive skills once in a while, especially in times of stress. When was the last time you forgot your lunch or couldn't find your keys or your phone? Were you in a hurry or stressed about something? Maybe working memory is not a problem for you generally, but we all have some executive skills that are stronger than others. And like our other executive skills, working memory is directly impacted by our emotions. ADHD expert Ray Jacobson describes working memory as a temporary sort of mental scratch pad, holding all the information we need at the moment. Some people need to use more of their scratch pad or working memory for processing what others might be able to do more quickly. Personally, this affects me when people give me directions. My scratch pad does not have enough space to listen to or focus on the directions and then remember them. As well, lurking in the background is always my anxiety, which used to start up every time someone gave me directions. I was immediately distracted by trying to find a pen and paper, and then cover my embarrassment when I had to ask them to start again. Now I just I make notes on my phone, or I get the address and put it into Google Maps or my GPS. We can all learn coping skills to support our executive functions. So the more we learn about the human brain, the better we understand that it takes until our mid-20s for the prefrontal cortex to fully develop. which is the area of the brain responsible for executive skills. Until our brains are fully developed, we rely on support and guidance from those around us, usually our caregivers, parents, teachers, and others in our communities. So the first key is co-regulation, and it's critical. I think though, before we dive into co-regulation, we should talk a little bit about regulation first before we talk about co-regulation. So what is regulation? We regulate ourselves in much the same way as a dimmer switch for a light. By the way, when I was making this slide, it kind of shows my age. I'm dating myself, but I was thinking dimmer switch like the one in the center, but I realized a lot of people now are using their phones with dimmer switches. So I'm pretty sure that's familiar to many of you. We regulate ourselves in much the same way as the dimmer switch for light. We dial our energy and emotions up or down, depending on the situation. As adults, most of the time we're in control of the switch, but sometimes our energy and emotions take over. This is part of being human. As our brain's prefrontal cortex develops and our executive skills develop, we gain more control. So this is a child-friendly definition of regulation that my co-author Jen Palmer and I have developed for a unit on regulation for grades 1 and 2. Even though the language is simple, it also works for older students. Regulation is when your thoughts, feelings, energy, and actions work together to keep you safe and connected. Sometimes we can do this ourselves, and sometimes we need help. When we are regulated, we can take care of ourselves and others in our community. Our brains depend upon a feeling of safety that comes from being connected to others. Trauma can derail this feeling of safety. Researchers and people in the mental health field have now begun talking about something called felt safety. This term is more accurate when describing a person's experience. For example, trauma can impact how safe a person feels and make them feel unsafe, even in a situation in which others feel totally safe. This idea of felt safety will help us realize when co-regulation is needed and which support strategies to offer. So co-regulation is when another person uses their thoughts, feelings, energy, and actions to help someone feel safe and connected. When we are regulated, we can help others to regulate. If you're a teacher, you probably find a large part of your day is spent, wisely I might add, being a co-regulator for your students. Same for parents. There's been a big focus in education, though, on teaching children self-regulation. We often expect children to be able to regulate above their developmental level. It's complicated because a student might be able to do something one day, but not the next. We are working toward self-regulation, but children need co-regulation first. Those who are having more frequent challenges regulating will need a co-regulator longer and perhaps more often. Even teenagers and adults can use a co-regulator in times of stress. As adults, we lean on our partners, friends, and family when the going gets tough. Self-regulation is when you use your thoughts, feelings, energy, and actions to stay safe and connected on your own. We can teach tools and strategies that support children and teens' regulation. The effectiveness of specific regulation strategies, like taking a deep breath, for example, varies from person to person. As adults, we found through experience that some things work better for us than others. Take a moment here to think about what you do to regulate as an adult. Some people do like taking a deep breath. For others, that doesn't seem to do much for them. The three most important aspects of learning, attention, focus, and memory, are all controlled by our emotions, not cognition. I wanted to emphasize the word controlled in this quotation. I agree with Dr. Brackett. We can't begin to use these skills unless we are emotionally regulated. We can be emotionally regulated when we feel safe and connected, which brings us back to co-regulation. So co-regulating successfully requires proactive strategies and responses. We do many of these things automatically. Thinking about it more intentionally helps to ground us when emotions are high. And we'll go through these one at a time. So regulating yourself first. Much like putting on your own oxygen mask first in an airplane emergency. As a parent or teacher, you're an important co-regulator. So you can do that by taking a quick moment to think about your own nervous system and your body's energy level. Ask yourself, what's your dimmer switch set on? Are you grounded? How intense are your emotions? Or maybe your energy's too low and you feel overwhelmed. Too high, too low, or just right for the situation. Check your thoughts and feelings. Do you need to adjust your self-talk? Switching from one of my things that pops into my head a lot, here we go again, to, oh, my child feels this right now. Reframe, a switch from thoughts like they're just doing that to get my attention to what do they need right now? And then use the strategies that work for you. The second step is to plan for dysregulation. Human beings become dysregulated. It's going to happen, probably at the most inconvenient time. So what's your plan? Jody Carrington, Canadian speaker and author, I love this quote. She says, "The job of little people is to lose their minds, and our job is to walk them through it as often as we're able." What strategies work best for you to keep everyone safe and calm, and to calm your child? So thinking ahead, you can identify challenging situations, practice self-care, although I know that's tricky, teach, model, and practice regulation strategies with your child, and introduce a Plan B day. A Plan B day is for hard days. Plan B days are days with one or more, at school we call them setting events, such as coming down with an illness. So it's something that sets you up to have a bad day. The last time I made a Plan B day at school was for a deaf student when her favorite teacher's aide, the only one who could sign, by the way, was away for the day. This rarely happened because that TA is a superhero. But when it did, the student would have 3 or more meltdowns if we tried to follow the regular plan without signing support. I could not totally not blame her for that. Her Plan B day included some work activities at her independent level, more breaks, and more preferred activities, especially in the afternoon when she was more tired. This allowed everyone to get through the day safely. On these days, you can have students do their regulation routines more frequently. What would this look like at home? What would you encourage your child or teen to do when they feel overwhelmed? At homes, you could also lower the demands, help them regulate, offer more breaks, support, or I said accommodations. I don't know if you call that accommodation at home, but maybe you do something, they do something if they have a chore to do so that they're not doing the whole thing themselves. Do favorite and familiar activities that are also regulating. For this thing, I would suggest not computer games, which are escalating. The ones which cause your good-natured child to throw the controller across the room. If they're going to play computer games to regulate, then you might want to have a little chat with them about which ones are appropriate and which ones help them to bring their emotions to a calmer level. Focus on relationship building. Spend some time together at home if you can. The third step is to understand your child's nervous system. What situations are difficult for them? What helps them to reset? What's reasonable to expect at your child or student's age? Have they experienced trauma? How's their sleep routine? Do they get enough sleep? Between 5 and 11 years old, children need 9 to 11 hours of sleep a night. The fourth step is to check and adjust your expectations of your child. Consider your child's development. Are your expectations reasonable given their developmental level and if they have any other conditions? Then check your expectations of yourself. Have you been comparing yourself to unrealistic standards, maybe shared on social media? Practice self-compassion. Give yourself permission to be imperfect. Would it be helpful to reach out to someone for support? This includes support for your child as well, if that would work for you. The fifth step is to check in with your child's state of regulation. What is their dimmer switch set at? Is their energy too high, too low, or just right? What is the intensity of their emotions? I love this image. So the sixth step will be there, and I'm calling be there and hold space when possible. As a parent, part of planning for dysregulation would be thinking through how to manage meltdowns before they happen. This can be hard to do when you have kids in so many different places. Having meltdowns, grocery store, family dinners, schools are generally not set up for meltdowns. As a teacher, you should be following a learning plan or behavior plan if there is one. And if not, and dysregulation is becoming more frequent, consulting your school team might be helpful. Part of planning ahead could also, at home, be talking with siblings about regulation. And then if you're teaching regulation at school to the whole class, the discussion can be respectful and inclusive. Feeling safe and regulated is a human need. It's not necessary to single out one child. This is the image that I love. This dysregulation looks different for everyone. This is the perfect image of co-regulation. What helps your child to feel safe when they have big emotions? It helps to know that when children are having a meltdown or losing it, that their prefrontal cortex is offline and they have limited ability to hear, think, and make choices. You're essentially waiting for the cortisol and adrenaline generated by the distress to be processed by their body and for them to begin to calm. Reflect on what's working and what's missing that you could put in place for next time. So the last step is to strengthen your connection and build your relationship. Try to spend some time that's special for you and your child doing something they enjoy, even if it's a video game. This can be important. Make time to check in even on busy days at home and at school. I recently watched a young teacher move around a grade 2 classroom at the beginning of lunchtime, touching base with a few students as they ate. It was just priceless to watch their faces light up as she talked with each of them. Build connection activities into everyday routines at home. Maybe it's dinner time, talking about the best thing that happened that day. Celebrate successes. So the second key is knowing your strengths. Before we can build on them, we need to know what they are. As adults, so we can be effective co-regulators, and for our children, so we can build on their strengths. These two books by Peg Dawson and Richard Guare have informal rating scales that might be helpful to figure out what your strengths are as well as your areas of challenge. They're not norm referenced and shouldn't replace the use of norm reference rating scales or formal testing when it's appropriate. The first book on the left, Smart but Scattered Guide to Success, has an executive skills questionnaire for adults. And there's a quick online version on the smartbutscattered.com website that's appropriate for high school students and adults. The second Smart but Scattered book with the purple cover has rating scales for preschool, elementary, middle school, and parents. I think that just about covers everybody. So identifying your strengths as an educator and a parent will help you to help your child or student. And you can start thinking about these questions. How would you describe your child's personality? How does it match your personality? What do you do well? What do you struggle with? And so on. The third key, emotional regulation, is supported by co-regulation and develops as our brains develop. Emotional regulation is important because it impacts our ability to access other skills. Remember the example of someone giving me directions and I started to anxiously look around for a pen? At that point, my anxiety hijacked my brain and I was not able to listen to or process the instructions. We need to be regulated before we can function or learn well. We're going to spend quite a bit of time today talking about emotional regulation. So it would be simplistic to say that emotional regulation involves only these 4 skills. In fact, an argument could be made that we need all the executive skills to regulate our emotions. However, these 4 are the basis for regulation. Research emphasizes that connection and co-regulation with a safe and caring person forms the basis of all growth and learning. As humans, we need to have experienced feeling safe and connected before we know what it feels like to be regulated. When we need to be regulated to develop socially, emotionally, and academically. And we're wired as a species to seek connection, so this is possible. Sometimes these connections develop more slowly, but once we are connected, we usually have a sense of felt safety. Trauma can interfere with this, however. Putting in place the remaining building blocks still supports emotional regulation and can be part of the healing process. Predictability reduces anxiety, which frees up our brains, and providing a sense of agency by offering more choices and autonomy starts us down the path to independence. And these are all the building blocks. Starting with physical safety, it's funny because when I was preparing for this webinar, my first thought was, seriously, everyone knows how to keep children physically safe. But as I gave it more thought, it's true, we know how to keep them safe, but teachers and caregivers don't always have the resource and education to do it well, and some things are beyond our control. This can lead to heartbreaking situations for children, teens, and their families. It's further exacerbated by the fact that children with ADHD are at increased risk of accidents and injuries. Supervising adults need to understand their job is first and foremost as co-regulators. They'll be more effective if they have positive connection or relationship, especially with the most challenging children who need it the most. I recently found some online training programs for lunchtime supervisors and playground aides that might be just the ticket to support this important role. I also recommend having a look at commonsense.org for their free downloadable programs on digital citizenship, online safety, and bully proofing. So here we go on the road to predictability. How can we support emotional regulation by making home and school more predictable? Some of you are already superstars at this, and some may just be starting down this road. Others may be well down the road and sidetracked by any number of life's challenges. But it doesn't matter where you are. Just thinking about it puts you back on the road. So the first stop is values, rules, and norms. At home, you have had your whole child or teen's life to date to share your values, set rules, and determine consequences. Whether you feel like this is working or not, you've been at it for a while. At school, traditionally, we set rules at the beginning of the year. More and more teachers are moving toward making rules for safety, but then creating norms for everything else. A norm is concrete. It's an accepted standard of behavior, usually describing what to do or not do, such as be safe, or for a younger child, maybe we would say safe hands. For norms to be effective, there need to be concrete examples of what safe hands look like. In the classroom, it might mean keeping hands to yourself in a lineup or holding scissors properly. They also need to be created together, and that is actually the biggest difference between norms and rules. At school, these agreed upon behaviors can be class-wide or school-wide. The next stop is consequences. I feel strongly about spending some time untangling the current discussions around consequences. Some children experience consequences more frequently than others. Often, they're the ones whose impulse control and emotional control develops later than their peers. Consequences are complicated. I remember discussions I had with my own kids, and in fact, every child I have ever taught. Fair is not equal. Some children seem to have an easier time understanding this than others. Some struggle through adulthood trying to wrap their heads around the idea. Every child, whether they have executive skills challenges or not, develops at their own rate. We need to consider that when determining the consequence. Sometimes this feels like walking on a tightrope. We also live in a society plagued by racism and other forms of discrimination, which decreases the likelihood that consequences will be equitable. Our struggle determining consequences is a reflection of the very slow and overdue change in our North American education system as we move from a punishment-based system to a consequence-based system. Laurie Desautels, assistant professor, speaker, and author, begins the discipline process by asking questions, what can I do to help you get it right next time? What skill or strategy do you need to learn? Of course, they may not know, but it's a beautiful place to start, which completely shifts the focus of the conversation. She says a lot more in her book, Connections Over Compliance, and it's definitely worth a read. It's on the left there of the slide. That brings us to the discussion of can't or won't. Can the child or teen do the thing you've asked? In my 36 years of teaching, I've heard many responses to this question. The most common ones are, yes, he can. He's just choosing not to. Or, he's making bad choices. Or, yes, she can. She just wants attention. Yes, he can, because I saw him do it yesterday. Yes, she can, because I know she can do it. She's just being stubborn. Sometimes an adult will say, oh, I'm not sure. I'll check. The next stop on the road to predictability is teaching emotional regulation. After we've shared our values with them and explained the reasoning behind rules and maybe even work together to create norms so they understand what we expect them to do, we need to give children and teens the tools to do it. One of the most effective things we can do is teach them how to regulate their big emotions, both proactively and in the moment. The good news is that it's much more effective to apply strategies before their dimmer switch is on full. When this happens, their brain is overloaded and they flip their lid, if you're familiar with Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. If not, you should check it out on YouTube. They can't hear you or process information when they're overwhelmed and dysregulated. By teaching them to regulate their emotions, we give them the tools to prevent some of the more intense situations. The bad news is that doing it independently requires a fairly developed prefrontal cortex that can support advanced executive functions. On a basic level, the emotional regulation requires response inhibition, emotional control, flexibility, and stress tolerance. However, as we look to strengthen our regulation and become more proactive, we need more advanced skills. The most powerful emotional regulators are aware of states of their emotions and nervous system and can tolerate the stress of this while they sort out the situation. That adds stress tolerance and metacognition to the list. In the moment, powerful regulators can assess the situation, take other perspectives as needed. They can slow their responses down and delay their reactions, which gives them time to think about the most important part of the situation and evaluate ways of responding. They have strategies to settle their bodies and soothe their emotions. They can choose from a menu of familiar responses that help them solve the problem to their satisfaction, reaching their goal. We could probably add in the remaining skills, but let's just stop there and consider the age of the child or teenager that we're expecting to do this and their skill level. In fact, when was the last time you struggled with a situation, and how successful were you managing? So that brings us back to co-regulation. Again, this is how we support, model, and teach regulation. The next stop is creating protocols for fixing our mistakes. The other element of creating predictability at school and at home is having a structure for repairing relationships and mistakes. Knowing that there will be some sort of resolution or closure to distressing events helps children feel safe. These are the executive skills involved in apologizing. I may have gotten carried away, but I don't think so. When mistakes are made, guilt, shame, and feeling a lack of control can contribute to a disempowering spiral for pretty much everyone involved. This is especially true when the same mistake is repeated over and over again, which happens if we have challenges with executive skills. Whatever we can do as co-regulators to interrupt this spiral can only be helpful. You can't apologize for what you did if you don't know what you did. Stress tolerance and emotional control allow you the space which helps you to regulate so that you can access your prefrontal cortex. Working memory and metacognition allow you to think about what you did. Both apologies and restitution require empathy. I love this quotation from a 2020 research article. Feeling empathy for someone means understanding his or her emotions and personally experiencing the same. It means creating a customized space in one's own inner world to host the world of another. In other words, it refers to the ability to share and comprehend another person's thoughts and moods. If a toddler hits another toddler, the adult might model empathy, metacognition, and flexibility. Oh, look, you hit him, and ouch, now he's hurt and crying. The second part of repairing a problem is restitution or making amends. Taking this kind of action can avoid or reduce the power of the spiral. This might look like after hitting someone, you offer an ice pack, or if you said hurtful things, you could try a redo. Can I try that again in a kinder way? Of course, this last one will require support if your child's not yet developed executive skills such as flexibility or emotional control, not to mention the generosity on the part of the other person. In order to make amends, we need to unpack what happened and why. Restitution is often the result of a debrief of some sort with the child or teen. Debriefs require an emotionally regulated adult who can remain objective. It's easy to slip into judgment and say things like, you made a bad choice, or what will you do next time to make a good choice? This has the same implication, by the way, which the child understands on some level, probably a personal one. What if we said, when you hit your friend, it hurt them and they cried. Next time they take your toy, what could you say or do? Restitution can be done in a few seconds right after the conflict. However, with more intense situations, people need time to calm down. The next stop is setting up transitions to reduce stress. Transitions also support predictability at school and at home. They can be a challenge for all children as their executive skills developed. So to support transitions, we can make them expected, ask them or talk with them about how they can help you and do their job as part of their job in part of the transition. You could use the first then schedule or stand timers. We can also help them mark time by giving them a 5-minute warning. Lots of people do this, but some kids will need a 10-minute warning as well. Make sure you hear that they hear you and ask them to confirm verbally or with a thumbs up maybe. Or you could use a timer. Visual timers are great for children who can't read a clock or who lose track of time because you can't see time as it passes. Maybe you want to play beat the timer or use a song to help kids understand how much time they have. For older students, you can use Sarah Ward's working clock. the last thing we can do is manage our own frustration and anxiety so we can stick to the plan and co-regulate as needed. Transitions are already anxiety-inducing, so adding adult stress into the equation only makes things worse. Our next stop is creating rituals and routines. Rituals and routines also help build predictability. These are some rituals that you might have at home or at school. A ritual is a consistent sequence of actions or gestures that have a deeper meaning for the person doing them, and they often teach values. Interestingly, sometimes these actions have no purpose in themselves aside from the meaning we give them. Olympic karate competitor Ariel Torres wore his lucky underwear to win the first U.S. medal in men's kata at the Tokyo Olympics in 2020. The thing is, doing a ritual action feels at a neurological level like we're exerting self-control. It feels like we're doing something in a situation in which we might not feel like we have a lot of power. So rituals provide us with a sense of agency and build our confidence. Many rituals are also social in nature, which helps us to connect with others, and we know that is regulating. There are too many routines to mention when I started thinking about it, so I wanted to focus on end-of-the-day routines. I made up 2 possible routines here. Think about your own routines at school and at home as I go through them. The first thing I wanted to mention is how many transitions there are. 8 in the home example on the left and 7 in the school example on the right. The impact is increased if you have to go to a different location or you have to meet a timeline like bedtime, for example. And it's important to note that some routines are hard to follow on a bad day. So you might end up with a plan B day at that point. Things to support transitions would be checklists, calendars, schedules, visual schedules. You can also do the same at school or at home for chores. Do you have a chores list or a checklist? If they have a chores and homework, how do you balance those? Are they both a battleground? If so, can you change it up in some way by using routines? And then the last question is, how are you functioning at this time of day? You're the co-regulator. So what do you need to do to support yourself? The next stop is using the power of visuals. So Dr. Russell Barkley recommends providing point of performance supports. The best point of performance support I can think of are visuals. I've added the photo of a classroom schedule for the day as well as a photo of my front door. My boys are now young men, so I borrowed this visual reminder from a friend whose child is 9 and can read. Even though he can read, he added little icons for faster reference. The last stop on this road to predictability is communication between school and home. Having a supportive team behind them makes students feel more empowered. Common purpose and communication are the glue that hold the team together. Communication requires time. Teachers and parents are busy people, so building a routine for communication can streamline it. I've seen some creative communication solutions, and these are a few of the options that I've listed. I can only recommend that you find something that works for both home and school. Okay, so we made it down the road to predictability, but this is only a rest stop. I have to put Timmy's in there because I'm Canadian. Before we finish our journey to supporting emotional regulation, we need to support a sense of agency in our children or students. Agency is a feeling of one's power or control. Increasing children and students' agency lets them know that we trust them, and we believe that they're working their way toward independence, however far along they are right now. A 2-year-old might say, "Me do it," as they wrestle for a sense of agency. In much the same way as we watch while they put on their hat crookedly, we encourage our older children and students to do what they can do, and with some trepidation, support our teens as they get their first job or learn to drive. It takes an intentional commitment to set up the structures and space for student agency. As an adult, it can sometimes feel like an act of courage on our own part. At school, we can nurture a sense of agency by giving students voice, autonomy, praise, and trust, and by using student-centered learning. Helping people with executive skill challenges regulate their bodies starts with common sense. It's the same for everyone, right? Good diet, exercise, sleep, hygiene, and mental health. Piece of cake. Well, only if you have all 12 skills, and even then, that's debatable. But we don't expect our elementary age children to be independent yet, so how do we support them on the road to independence? Teaching healthy habits and the science behind them will help them develop fluency to talk about their health. However, when you have executive skill challenges, you'll likely have difficulty with a few or many of the daily tasks. People with ADHD say that the following things can interfere: overwhelming stress, including burnout for older students and young adults, task initiation, organization, sensory issues, difficulty taking perspective, that's where deodorant might come in, shifting tasks, which is transitions, and impulse control that might lead to sugary foods. And then there are the challenges of sleep. Sometimes this can be alleviated by tweaking medication. However, 3 out of 4 people with ADHD have sleep problems, and some even have sleep disorders. It's way more difficult to regulate your emotions when you're tired. Hyperactivity is another factor to consider with physical regulation. All children need to figure out how to use up their extra energy so that it doesn't get them in trouble with their parents and their peers, and so they can settle their bodies into sleep at night. This becomes even more important for those with hyperactivity. At school, we make our learning more student-centered, hands-on, and just generally more active. And breaks are another way to use up extra energy, to power down or reset. But the end goal is for students to be aware of their own state of physical regulation and then choose strategies that help them adjust their energy level to the situation. My co-author, Jen Palmer, and I call this the 2-step reset. It kind of sounds like a dance. This process gives everyone a chance to move together in a physical activity and then connect or reconnect to the previous or new activity. And we teach this practice explicitly. If we have young children listening to a story, we might follow the story with an action song and then a call and response activity before moving on to the next activity. Kindergarten teachers are masters of this. And it also works with older students. Maybe it looks like a lap around the field and then a partner chat. Mental health is the 5th key. It's directly linked to physical health. Mindfulness is gaining popularity in schools as a strategy for emotional and physical regulation. It's very important to recognize that your students may not all be ready or willing to take part in the same mindfulness activities. Some students will need to develop their regulation skills first. So we can do this by working on mindful readiness activities. I meant to have those ready for the handout, but I don't. So I will put a list up on my website after. You can encourage students to think flexibly during a mindfulness activity. So if some are doing mindful readiness activities, they're still part of the same mindful experience. So thinking proactively, we can support many executive skills in the environment. And I had provided also a handout about ways that things to think about when you're setting up a classroom if you have one. But you can think about the same things at home. You can organize your areas by function: work, materials for play, toys and equipment, common areas, and so on. And then you can create norms for maintaining these spaces, and that would help build community and set up effective learning spaces. And there are many blogs and workshops about setting up your classroom or home. However, one of my favorite people on that topic is Sarah Ward. In particular, I enjoyed her conversation about physical pathways in the classroom, which is probably one of the last things we think about when we're setting up a class. Last one of the ways to learn about emotional and physical regulation is to explicitly teach brain science and how our nervous system works. So for adults learning about executive function, have a look at some of these resources. Smart but Scattered, again, by Dawson and Guerre and the Smart but Scattered Teens. Castle.org teaches social emotional learning. They're a really good resource. Mindful Educators and Mindful Schools. Learning about polyvagal theory is always helpful because it talks about nervous systems. The regulatedclassroom.com is a good one if you're a teacher, and smilingmind.com.au is an Australian website. They have some good mental health and good mindfulness activities for families, and it's free as well. And then for children or teens, Castle's got some good recommendations as well. And then there's something called efstotherescue.com. They have lessons, and Mindful Schools also has 10 free lessons for kids. Books, if you're a teacher, Executive Function Skills in the Classroom, it's a good place to start. And children's fiction books, there's lots of fun picture books that you can even use for older kids, just because they're fun. And also there's YouTube channels. So How to ADHD is one of them. And then there's one specifically for teen called Teen Changers. And that's set up by a middle school teacher.
This person asks, I was wondering what you recommend as kids get older, like high school age, when you're no longer able to regulate or schedule them as they're more independent. Some of what worked for younger kids is no longer working when they're in charge of their own lives.
Yes, so I have a 28-year-old right now who's still struggling with some of his executive skills. And I hear you is what first thing I have to say. It kind of depends if you're specifically talking about regulation as in hyperactivity, or I mean, there are just so many kinds. Is it which skill is the one? Is it response inhibition? Are they having trouble controlling what they do, or is it task initiation? Sometimes as kids get older, they have more responsibilities. So task initiation, then they kind of get bogged down with the things that they're supposed to be doing now that they're older. Then they're, supposed to be doing, I don't know, more chores or care for their younger siblings, or maybe even just more homework. I'm not sure I'm answering that question well, but this is part of the issue. Is you almost have to be a detective to figure out where the which skill is it, and often it's more than one. So
that's very true. You do have to kind of be a detective and try to figure out what those things are that's driving the behavior, the result.
Mm-hmm.
This person says, just now in the list of books and resources, there was one on polyvagal theory, and they've heard of that, but oh no, I'm sorry, they've never heard of that. Could you briefly explain what that is?
No,
I cannot be brief.
However, I can't actually. I do a whole 3-hour workshop on that, but basically, it's a different way of looking at our nervous system, and oh my gosh, I don't even know if I could say it in. There is a really good video by Beacon. I think it's Beacon Hill. Beacon something. They're a UK organization. If you search them on YouTube, they have a really good video. It's called, oh dear, now I can't remember, of course. But
we can send it in the email if we forget.
Yeah, that will explain it all. It's a 12-minute video, but it's really worth watching.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll add that as a resource when we send out the recording. The next question is, how can you model or teach self-advocacy in a school setting for high school students that need support?
That's such a tough one. So I have sat with quite a few middle, well, I sit mostly with like grade 6, 7 kids, but self-advocacy, there are just so many parts of it. So one of the things that first comes to mind is you need to have the social skills to be able to ask for something in some sort of constructive way. And then you also need to actually task initiate in order to do that. So many kids realize when they get home that they should have been asking for something. If it's self-advocacy, like you want more time on an exam, or you want to do a redo of a homework assignment, then that's trying to, then you would be having conversations with your teachers. So you could help someone with that by rehearsing conversations, practicing how you would word it, and maybe even just brainstorming some of the kinds of things that would be helpful for them, for like the 2 examples I gave. And then there's the challenge of when you do ask to redo that assignment, what happens when the teacher says no? Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. So it's self-advocacy is challenging because sometimes we are empowering that, and sometimes we're not, and people have their reasons for saying no sometimes. So yeah, I think role playing is probably one of the best ways, but also maybe writing lists of even things that are options for them. Sometimes kids don't know what accommodations or what might be helpful for them.
Thank you. That kind of segues into this next question, that this person has a child with inattentive ADHD, and it's harder to know what is happening in their child's mind. So that what you were just talking about, do you have any recommendations to help them communicate their feelings? So teaching them those communication strategies.
Yeah. So someone very close to me has that difficulty. And I think in high school, one of the most useful things, later he told me, was learning what his executive skills were. So I guess when you're talking about that, then because communicating your feelings, that's complicated on so many levels, right? So I mean, creating a safe place is really important, but maybe it's a task initiation thing. Maybe it's just hard for them to remember to talk to you about their feelings because they're so busy with other things, or maybe they're just like every child, embarrassed or don't know where to start. So modeling, talking about your feelings would be helpful. I've had kindergarten teachers say, "Oh, Mrs. So-and-so is not very happy right now." And so she's going to go over here and take a few deep breaths. But, modeling is probably one of the best ways, actually, now that I think about it.
Yes, that's a great suggestion. Just showing that you also struggle with things on a regular basis, any one of us, and just communicating that verbally is very helpful to model.
I do have one other thing, and that is maybe labeling the feelings for them, but not as a, like, you are feeling this, but, oh, your face looks a little bit scrunched up. I wonder if you're feeling frustrated, or you're breathing a little bit more quickly. I wonder if you're feeling anxious or stressed. So sometimes labeling helps them too.
Yes, that also piggybacks on another question that's very similar. And I think that advice matches. So for this parent that says their 9-year-old has really big emotions when things don't go his way or when something is irritating, do you have any tips for dealing with and helping him through those times like this? So labeling is also a good strategy for that. Do you have any other suggestions?
Well, so the most effective one always is to head it off and to be proactive, and maybe just talk to them about, wow, well, maybe wow is not the best word actually, but last time the same thing happened, but speaking at it kind of in a curious way. I wonder what's going on, and I wonder what might make this better for you when this happens again. Sort of recognizing patterns, because things don't always happen in patterns, but that's one of the easiest ways to be proactive if something is happening over and over again. And then brainstorming strategies, or it's really hard. Sometimes these things are not within kids' control. It's things that other kids are doing. So then, maybe they need to ask for help. It depends. I think you said 9, right? Yeah. So who's the supervisor there? Because that would be the person that they go to for help. And then you can talk to them about, when would you ask them? Some kids go from 0 to 60 like so fast that there's no proactive, which is why I kind of go back to, like, before the situation, can you identify which ones would be challenging?
Thank you. Okay, switching gears. This person asks, you spoke about can't versus won't. Can you elaborate on how to handle situations like this? You mentioned that some adults say they don't know and will ask. Are you suggesting that we should ask the child?
Well, okay, so I live can't versus won't, so I can totally empathize there. Sometimes a child doesn't, or teenager or young adult doesn't realize that they can't. They actually think that they themselves are lazy if they aren't doing something, for example. So it's talking to them about what skill is that, and do they have challenges with that skill? Yeah, so I guess first of all, checking to make sure that the child, teen, or young adult understands what it is that they're trying to do. And then you can work with them to figure out, is this a can't or a won't? It might look like a won't. So an example would be a young adult that I know is, late for work. In fact, some days a no-show. So the reason is he's got his shoes on, he's got his keys, but now he, in fact, now there's no lunch. There's not the right kind of bread or whatever it is. So is that a can't or a won't? Well, you might think we'll just get another lunch, but if you're inflexible, that's not an option. So now you can't go to work. So there's that kind of digging, again, that detective work to figure out. Not everybody, I shouldn't say that, but so many people assume that they just won't do it.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Everybody who is asking questions that we're not able to get to tonight live, don't worry, we will get them answered for you. But this last question before we close out for this evening is, what do you do when they're having difficulty learning a skill? My son has an issue with losing or not doing well on a test compared to peers. He has difficulty with response inhibition, as you mentioned. He's 10 now, and we've been working on it for years already.
Okay, so the first question is, can he do the test? Is it at his level? If it is, then is it every test that he's not doing well on? Or is he really upset because he didn't get 100%? So sounds like he's probably struggling with the material at school. So that's worth looking at from an educational point of view. And then if that's the case, what can you put in place? So either accommodations or maybe you need to investigate some learning disability of some sort, unless there's already one diagnosed. And then as far as understanding his peers, really, that's I don't have any easier answers for that one. You just really need to make it clear that everybody learns differently, and that I'm sure he's got some strengths that other kids in his class do not have, right? So, I mean, that's sometimes seems to kids like a poor compensation for something that really they find embarrassing or frustrating, but we really need to celebrate what our kids are actually good at as well. So.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, everybody is leaving some very positive comments here. They're very grateful. So thank you for your time, and thank you for answering everybody's questions and sharing this information this evening. And thank you to all of our attendees. We appreciate you being here.